7 crew lifted off and then landed on the moon a few days later. Much of the attention, and especially during
With you fellas, that is the first time since I've been doing this show in 7.5 years that I've seen an entire studio audience get to their feet and applaud. And you've received a lot of that since you've come back. It must be an emotional type of thing. I mentioned you fellas, I use the word heroes, which I said, I know you've said it before in interviews, that you don't consider yourself at all, Captain, right?
Well, as a matter of fact, we didn't know just how the world was taking it until we actually got back on the ground.
That's right. You were really you're always the last to know,
people
right?
to find out about it.
You know, I never thought of it that way.
It was after meeting all the people and appreciating the feeling and emotion that they had, I sort of feel like maybe I missed something being up there.
We missed all the excitement, you know.
Yeah, I missed all the excitement. Were you kind of amazed at the outpouring of emotion from countries all over the world, not just the United States, but I can't remember a time when there's been a circumstance where somebody has been in that kind of a situation where the entire world and foreign countries and even the communist bloc and all of the countries of the world seemed to join together for a moment. Were you a little amazed at that reaction when you got back?
Yes, I think this is what really struck us, that for perhaps just an instant, maybe the whole world was together.
It's funny, they seem to get together on things like science, don't they? We're in a common...
In a common crisis, we all seem to join hands.
We sure do.
It's just like one human being helping another.
You're captain right now, Jim?
Yes, Johnny.
And Fred,
I'm a civilian.
You're civilian, and Jack?
Civilian also.
Civilian.
I was sort of outnumbered being in the military.
Yes. Captain in the Navy, right? I was an ensign in the Navy. You know what being an ensign in the Navy is like being a hood ornament on an Edsel. There's not much call for that. You've had a busy day today, haven't you? What's been happening since you've been in New York?
Well, we had lunch with Mayor Lindsay today. It was very nice. And
we had a press conference, after that.
And your show tonight, followed by a play.
You're going to see a play, and then there's another, I think, reception later on tonight with the mayor also, is there not?
And he told me that your car was double parked down below and the police towed it away.
Our mayor would tow away your capsule if it landed in New York. And it cost you $50. Don't fool with Lindsay. He's murdered. You've probably been asked every question in the book on what they call a debriefing. And David Brinkley once said on television, he never understood the term debriefing. He says, why not a briefing when you got back? What's the difference between a briefing and a debriefing? Anybody? Any fellows?
You would ask us those technical questions.
Yeah, Fred's is the English major?
Well,
why a debriefing?
I think a briefing would constitute the preparation and the training we go through getting ready to fly the flight. And debriefing is where we give our comments on how each phase worked and how we felt maybe our training was deficient and what we should do better the next time.
What was the greatest thrill when you got back outside, I suppose, talking to your wives? Jack is a bachelor, and talking to the president?
Well, on board the ship, they had a little communications link up with us. We had 3 phones, and it was sort of a one-sided conversation. All 3 of us were talking at one time, and Fred and I were talking to our wives, and Jack was talking to the entire Continental Airlines Stewardess Corps.
Jack has flown before, hasn't he?
You know, I thought I was going to get by without Jim making some comment about that, but he didn't. Last time we were
He set it up for me.
in Chicago, he said that a bachelor is like a new detergent. That's one that works fast and leaves no rings.
What are you doing about 11:30 every night? We have an opening on the staff, Jim, if you can come up with this stuff. You can come up with this stuff every night. You probably get tired of that, don't you, Jack? Because you're one of the few bachelors in the whole program, I guess, of NASA, right?
Yes.
And that they always have to have something to say. Now, they can talk about your kids and your wife and so forth. But I remember you because you went in with 3 days' notice on this flight, right?
Yes.
And they weren't prepared for that. And it drove the newsmen crazy because they weren't quite prepared to report on Jack Swikert. And they ran around. I saw them interviewing your landlord. True, you know. And the landlord says, yes, he has his nice place here. He lives right here. At the time that this happened, when you first knew that you had the trouble, that something was wrong, who's the first to know? You were the first one, I think, to radio back to Mission Control in Houston, right?
No, actually it was Jack. Jack was the man who said, I think we have a problem here.
Which I guess turned out to be the understatement of the century, I guess.
You know, the funny thing, we were going to get a recording from NASA of that particular time when it happened, thinking it would be very exciting, you know, and intense. But the strange thing about it is we listened to it, and it sounded like you had reported that you know, you didn't get your dime back from the payphone or something. It wasn't exciting at all in the context and the way you handle it. Is that because of the tremendous training and you're ready for this kind of a contingency and you just automatically react and then the emotions come a little bit later?
Well, I think that actually we didn't know really how serious the situation was at the time. Mm-hmm. And as it started to get more serious, our voices got a little bit more tense if you listen to the tapes closely.
It took about 45 minutes for, I guess, the problem to develop in its fullest.
Can you remember back? This is probably terribly difficult with all the things that you have to do and with shutting down one system and doing all of the technical things that you have to do. But can you remember in your mind was there fear at the time? I suppose there was, thinking that this possibly could be a fatal thing that could happen and you could be possibly stranded, or that the whole unit would explode or something? Is that moment of saying, good heavens, this is it, the percentages have caught up?
Well, I guess everybody kind of, you know, faces that situation where they say, gee, any place but here, anybody but me. And but there's only one thing to do in a situation like that, as we talked about it. That is, you have to just keep charging forward and you know, do everything possible to get back home again.
And I suppose go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, there's another point too. We have backups for everything, and we were never in a position to where we didn't at least have one more direction to go. In this case, the limb. So if I charged into the limb and turned it on and found something wrong there, then I would have maybe got a lot more concerned.
That could have been the ball game right there, huh? Yeah, that's fascinating. I think it was Alan Shepard once who said, they asked him how he felt when they made the first flight, and he said it was a strange feeling traveling around the Earth in a vehicle in which you knew every part was made by the lowest bidder. I think that was Shepard. I don't know. I mean, you fellas didn't have any of this on the trip. You know the saying, too soon, too old, too late? Do you agree, Edward?
Well, a lot of people know you're never too old to smarten up about some things. For example, I know that if you want to stay on the young side, you should exercise and you should eat sensibly. One way is by starting the day with a good breakfast, like Kellogg's Product 19. It's the cereal with 100% of the minimum daily adult requirements for vitamins and iron. A powerhouse and delicious. So get back on the young side. Start right now with Kellogg's Product 19.
We're talking with the Apollo 13 astronauts. Jim, you lost, what, 14 pounds on this?
14
on this
pounds.
Flight? Mm-hmm. Was that because the food is getting worse or getting better?
Well, the food is getting better, but we followed your instructions on your show a few months ago, and we didn't know how to eat it.
They sent us some food from when they had the mock-up upstairs here in the studio, Made H, I guess, and one night we tried it, and you said your wife...
My wife saw it.
Is she here? She's here tonight.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Where's your wife sitting? Would you like to meet Mrs. Where are you, Mrs. Lovell? I've seen you on magazines. How are you, Mary? Yeah, I guess what's that Winston Churchill said, they also serve who also only stand and wait. That must be very, very tough on wives and children to wait for you. But the food, yeah, we had it one night, and we didn't do it right or something. We were putting, you said a moment ago, water in the things we shouldn't have put water in. I don't think we should ever go on a trip, Ed. They haven't made
about 5 feet.
They have not made the booster yet that can get you
Why, since I've lost all this weight, are you still doing these heavy jokes about
I
it?
don't know. I have nothing else. I was asking Jim during the commercial break here when the next, as this is delayed somewhat, the next projected flight, has it not?
Yes, it was originally scheduled sometime in October, and now probably the earliest we can launch is in December.
Have they, as of yet, determined what went wrong with any degree of certainty? They knew that you blew out, practically the whole side panel of the main booster, right? And they thought it was, in a battery?
Well, we lost, of course, all of our electrical power, the 3 fuel cells and the
Right.
2 oxygen tanks, and I'll refer to my command module expert to give you
Yeah, Jack, what do you think there?
Which means that he can't quite technically get the answer to this. That's what's known as the commander passing the buck. No, the problem lay in the number 2 oxygen tank, and we know that it was right now a short in the wiring. I don't think that that they have quite completely identified it. To be truthful, I've been gone from the review board, and I haven't followed the progress of the review board, so I haven't got the latest information on what exactly happened.
And since you did have to jettison that part, they don't really have any tangible evidence to lay their hands on, do they? They just kind of have to go by what could have happened and then get rid of the alternatives, I suppose.
Well, it's amazing what they can do with just telemetry. We jettisoned, of course, the part that went wrong,
Right.
but all the readouts that the ground had gotten from telemetry and the communications during the incident and after, and plus their analysis, allowed themselves to analyze the situation and come up with the answer.
Was there any time that you thought that the backup system, that you possibly... This seems like a dumb question, and I don't mean it morbidly, but it crosses people's minds. You've probably seen the motion picture they made, Marooned, where they were stranded. Has that ever crossed your mind at any time when you go on one of these flights, and you've got more time in space than anybody else, Jim, that's saying, what would I do, in fact, if this did happen? I mean, the possibility, I guess, always exists in any dangerous thing. Human error, mechanical error is there, even with the greatest expertise. What would you do if you couldn't get back? I know that sounds like an insipid question, but I'm sure that you must have thought about it, philosophically, someplace.
Well, I think everybody in the program has that thought, that feeling. We, of course, look at it from the fact that we make things so reliable and so redundant that it's only a remote possibility. And really, we just put it out of our minds. We have to, otherwise we'd never make a flight.
You could never really function, could you, as professional engineers under those circumstances? Yeah, Ed, you had a question.
I was wondering if it was planned beforehand that if something like this went wrong, was the LEM supposed to be used as this way? Was that planned in the program? Or was that a surprise thing that just developed because you had no other choice?
Let me let Fred answer that. He's our LEM expert.
They had some procedures way back in the back room somewhere where a long time ago someone had envisioned using the LEM as a lifeboat. They were pretty dusty. The only thing we had planned to use the LEM for in that regard was we had a procedure written in case the main engine on the command module failed burning in the lunar orbit partway. You then would scurry into the LEM and fire it up and use this engine to get you headed back home. And
I'll bet they've done an update on that, haven't they? On how to use that again.
But we never really envisioned powering down the command module. We always had the command module electrical system and oxygen system as a life support system.
One of the great problems was the cold, wasn't it? It got down to what, 38?
Down to 38 degrees.
38 degrees, and one of you, of course, had to stay up at all times to monitor and do the readouts, I suppose, on the systems. We have a short piece of film here. I think you did this on the way back, right? Mm-hmm. After all this problems, still not really even knowing, I guess, whether you got into the right window, as they say, to re-enter. So watch the monitor here in the studio, and gentlemen, if you'll tell us what you're doing at the time. Bobby, you want to roll the tape, please? Here we are.
What you're looking at now is the command module. It's down to about 38 degrees, very cold, and it's completely dead. Nothing's working, and you just saw the hatch that was...
Now that's up through the tunnel, as they say?
That's right, right into through the tunnel and back into the Aquarius, the lunar module, and Jack?
The interesting thing is that when you're right side up in the command module and you come down the tunnel, you're upside down in the LEM. So it takes a while to get reoriented.
Do you have any sense of direction here at all, whether you're upside down or not? Since there's no direction really such in space, is there?
Only visual. You have no balance, of course. I mean,
But since you're weightless,
no gravity.
I mean,
That's right.
up or down is relative, right?
There's our little tape recorder, which we played the theme from 2001.
After all of this trouble, you're listening to a radio show.
And Jack's asleep back there near the hatch. He was trying to get a little shut-eye at the time. The thing about our photography is we had to take it just when the light came around because we didn't want to use any interior lights because it used power.
Oh, I see.
So we had to shut down everything that wasn't necessary to save
Now,
power for the way
are
home.
you turning at this time?
Yes, we are turning, and there's Fred with his hand in his shirt there, going sound asleep, trying to get a little shut-eye.
Keeps your hands from floating up,
floating
which bother you when you're sleeping.
I never thought of that. There's Jim. Where's that Jack?
We had just one person who had the watch. He wore the hat with the communications, and the rest of the people were...
So there you're having dinner there.
Yep, there's Jack eating right now, and it's amazing. We can actually use a spoon and in zero gravity if there's enough viscosity in the fluid to hold it on the spoon.
I think this is right prior to entry. Jim and I were going up through the entry procedures. They required a lot of close cooperation with Jim in the LEM and myself in the command module. You see Jim rubbing his hands there, and that's because it was just that cold.
Of course, there was a time just before this last mid-course, or the mid-course at 105 hours, when we would still have missed the Earth, and so we had to make this particular maneuver to make sure we got captured by the atmosphere.
Right.
Otherwise, we'd have skipped off into space again.
That's what they call about the re-entry angle. It has to be so precise that you don't enter too fast, then you don't enter too shallow that you say, skip back into, skip away from the orbit.
Actually, these pictures were taken with a wide-angle lens that Fred held most of the time, and makes the interior of Aquarius a lot roomier than it actually is. It was sort of unique.
People get the impression when you see this on television that it's rather roomy, and yet it's really not at all, is it?
There's an advantage of zero-G. I shot my own pictures just by turning the camera and moving it away while it was still running.
What we're doing here, we're trying to stow everything. You know, we couldn't dump anything overboard, which presented a problem for 3 days, as you might think. So we had to stow it in all kinds of containers, and the waste products got to be quite deep there after a while.
I guess we've become space litter bugs already, haven't we? Gee, that's fascinating. To the average person who really is so hard for us to relate to that, do you ever get tired of the thrill? Is it a tremendous, tremendous thrill when you, another dumb question I suppose, when you get out and you look back and you see the Earth just hanging there, it must give you some strange feelings.
I think it does make all the astronauts that have flown a bit philosophical.
I would think so. You kind of got to think back, and it kind of puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
Well, you put the whole Earth just in your hand, you know, and it really makes you wonder, actually.
A minor planet, as somebody once said. Now, you haven't been on the moon, and yet this was really a triumphant space journey, because it proved that the backup system does work, and proved that the equipment is reliable. Are you going to fly again?
Well, I would like to. I seem to be disappointed, you know, going twice to the moon and not quite getting down there. However, down at Houston, there are a lot of people who are well qualified and who have not yet flown, and so my wife won't let me. It's the true story.
Well, I suppose she may have her slight reason there, not wanting to go through that again. Fred, how about you?
I think probably the true statement would be that every guy in the office would like to fly every flight. That's really impossible because, for instance, while we were training, 2 other crews were training same time, 14 and 15, and that's really not possible. I certainly would personally like to have another chance.
Jack, what are your feelings?
That's my feelings too.
I suppose all the fellows would like to have that unique honor.
Everything came about, in my case, so fast that I really, you know, I was sitting there right on the launch pad, and about 30 minutes prior to launch, when they hauled back the swing arm, I told Jim, I said, you know, I really think they're serious about launching me.
I've got one more. I was trying to think of a question today that you might not have been asked, and it's pretty tough. And this may sound dumb. Suppose, and people have said this, they know pretty well technically what the moon was and what it was composed of, and that there was no, the gravity was 1/6 and there's no air and so forth and so on. But and some people have said, well, possibly maybe their people or civilizations had, you know, you've heard this, right? Had arrived there maybe many, many years ago and lived, say, underground, right? With their own type of gravity and oxygen supply and so forth. Is there anything in the NASA program that would prepare you if you landed on the moon? Now, just, right? This sounds like it's not a dumb question. And all of a sudden, you look over and you see two people, fellows, coming out of a... Do they prepare you for that? What you would say? Or how you deal with this at all? Well, now, that doesn't sound strange. There's still a lot of people who believe that there are people on the moon, but they're living underground.
I think Jim's going to say that's why they took a bachelor law.
That's why we bought it.
Well, I think that answers it.
John, in answer to your question about getting philosophical, we did get a bit philosophical, and we brought you something tonight that we thought maybe you'd like to, from our crew here.
We know that you were a magician at one time and still are. As a matter of fact, I saw some of your card tricks, and so we thought we'd present this little picture to you with the caption. Perhaps you'd like to read it.
Oh, isn't that great? It says, I'll read it and then I'll show you the picture. It's a beautiful picture. It says to the great Carsoni, you found that out, huh? If you think you're a magician, try making this disappear. Sincere best wishes, the Apollo 13 crew, and they've all signed it. And of course, look at that magnificent shot of the Earth from space. This lower Baja California thing? Gee, I will treasure that very, very much, and I thank you. Gentlemen, I know you've had a long day. You know, you have more plans for this evening, and all I can say that you've been hearing many, many times, it's great to have you back. It was a magnificent, magnificent feat, and I think the whole entire world is tremendously proud of you, and it's a great thrill to have you here tonight. Jim?
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later. Harvey, you go ahead. Enjoy the play. Get your girl, man.